Hi there, I'm John and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm John from Nigeria, and on this channel I talk about books. I do the occasional book reviews, book tags, book hauls, everything bookish. You can find it here. And I sometimes write for a Substack called A Couple of Dorks, which I'll link below. I don't have pieces out for this year, but fingers crossed I will have some for some new releases soon. And I'm just going to jump into it. I am trying to do this all in like a single take, trying to not adjust, mess with the camera, and the light is going out, so I want to be as fast as possible. This is a review video, as you have seen from the title, of Slaughterhouse-5 by Kurt Vonnegut. I have owned this for quite a few years now. I cannot, maybe 4 years, 5 years, but I finally decided to jump on it last year in December and start because of one of my mutuals on Instagram, who I must mention. His name is Marcus. I don't know, I will send this video to him, but he is like the biggest Vonnegut fan, but also the biggest fan of this particular book. I think he has reread it 4 or 5 times. He rereads Vonnegut every year, so yeah, he's one of the people, probably the person who really pushed me to finally go for it last year, also because it was relatively short. But yeah, I had heard extremely good things about this book and I finally read it. And yeah, if you are not new here, you know the drill. I'll talk a bit about my thoughts, what I found to be the message and things like that. And yeah, so a short summary is that Slaughterhouse-5 follows a man called Billy Pilgrim. It's kind of this war novel but also a sci-fi novel. It's mixed together, and we follow a man called Billy Pilgrim in the midst of World War II. And in the midst of World War II, he ends up experiencing these instances of time travel where it's like World War II, but also we go around the scope and the entirety of his life in a sense. And that's really like the base summary of what this novel is about. It is the story of a life, the story of a war veteran you can say, and like his entire life. Where the novel really begins for us is from the first page. We open with this sentence: all this happened more or less. The war parts anyway are pretty much true. One guy I knew really was shot in Dresden for taking a teapot that wasn't his. Another guy I knew really did threaten to have his personal enemies killed by hired gunmen after the war, and so on. I've changed all the names. So we open with this first person narrator who is not Billy Pilgrim. We open with a first person narrator who gives us like his little account of the war. It turns out he was also in World War II, but you can also say this is like Vonnegut, the writer, as well, which some people have said that he is like the one who opens the novel. He is the narrator of the novel, the writer himself. So yes, we open with this unnamed first person narrator who tells us of his time in World War II, and he also tells his life in a very quick summary to us. And it starts where it's telling us he did go back to Dresden in 1967, quite a number of years after the war has passed. And even from the beginning, the first chapter, with the way it sounds, with the tone of voice, it already has this very playful, humorous tone, and with the repetitions, so it goes, if you have read the novel, that we would come to see progressively as the book goes on. And it's after that first chapter that we move into what's the Billy Pilgrim part of the book, the other story, or the story of the novel. And the one section in that first chapter, the narrator intro chapter, that kind of struck me is this point where the narrator is telling us, like I said, went back to Dresden, but then he was reaching out to some of his war mates, the ones who were still alive, and one of them he goes to visit, and in his house he meets the man, meets his wife. And there's this moment where the wife is hitting things in the house, banging things, while the men are talking in the kitchen, and she's very angry. And the narrator is thinking the reason she's angry, and they eventually have a discussion, and she's like it's not a particular reason, and she just out of the blue says, you were babies then, you were just babies then. And she was like, you were just babies in the war, like the ones upstairs, because their children are upstairs sleeping. And it's like, but you're not going to write it that way, are you? Because the narrator is saying he's trying to write a novel, an account of what happened in the war, and she's like, you're not going to write it that way. And it's like, you'll pretend you were men instead of babies, and you'll be played in movies by Frank Sinatra and John Wayne and some of those other glamorous war-loving dirty old men. And it's really what I think, the sentiment she puts forth, how they were babies in the war but like had to be men, it is really echoed through the story of Billy Pilgrim that we eventually get, which is the bulk of the novel. And then we segue into like the next chapter. That's where the book really begins, where Vonnegut introduces our central character to us, Billy Pilgrim, who he's described to us that he comes unstuck in time. And so it's really like a front row seat, I would say, to like being in the war, because him getting unstuck in time is a lot of like moving through time, past, present, future, back to present. And it's like, but then a lot of it, we are like at the forefront of his eyes and witnessing what he is witnessing in the war. So that's why I say it's kind of like a front row seat to like what happens in the war. And I would say that really, I think that was the most interesting thing about the novel to me, the concept of the book, the whole time travel thing, but really it's the way it is executed here. We like, the story does flow from like the present day, so it's like post the war, and we see Billy at the beginning, at this point where he is having this conflict with his daughter, because he has recently gone on a radio station to talk about how there was this time when aliens abducted him to this place called Trafalgar, and everything that happened to him from that point. And it speaks of the place as how like being there, it's like one day on Earth or a few hours on Earth, it's like a lot of years then. And he has gone on this radio station, and the daughter thinks he's going crazy post the accident he suffered a few years back. That's like way after the war. And it's from that point that we shoot back in time and like see him in the war, and then learn about like his life. And it's so interesting to me how it's like carried out, because we can be at this specific part in the present, right? Like in the present is the present, but also the present, like World War II, is the present. That's what is so fascinating to me. Like many points of the novel, even the past, we go back to they are the present in a sense. And it's kind of goes to this idea that the Trafalgarians, if you can call them that, that's the aliens, they have about how like time is a construct and etc, and like there is no time to them does not exist, right? And so because we will be here, and the way it's written sometimes as like dreams going back, but then I don't know, I just found like the execution so seamless. Like if anything, let's say aside the grand like burst that the novel does not take, it does like fascinate you with how it is carried out, how it's executed. And I know it does sound very wacky, like with the idea of like there being aliens abducting him saying there were aliens who abducted him and everything, but in the end it all feels like very tame when you read through it. And not even in a bad sense, but for how like much there's a sci-fi element to the book, it is all like grounded in a sense in humanity. It's like human beings at the center of it, and I think that's what really grounds it. So it never, like the sci-fi of it never really overshadows like the human content, or like the parts where humanity is happening more. And a lot of the book does take place in the war, to be fair, a lot of it does take place in the war, but then we are seeing through the eyes of a man who feels like he's sleepwalking through the war because he really does not want to be there, or he does not want to be alive as well. And so like this first-hand account is almost like it's from the eye of like a zombie in a way. We have this one moment very early on, we are shown in the war where like Billy, it said that that's where he first comes unstuck in time, even before he meets the alien. He's having there like a lot of like the company he was with has been killed, so it's just him, this one young guy called Roland Weary, and two other guys who were together, and they are just the only ones left in that area and trying to just like walk forward and find something, anything. And it's like they are like German soldiers, possibly like hidden in some places or scouting people like this, and they are trying to escape as well. But then Billy is just like, it's just like he's dead, and Roland Weary is angry at some point because Billy feels like Billy is slowing them down, and they even get into like this fight where he's hitting Billy and Billy is not doing anything, and it's just like so debilitating and so sad to watch because like it is even so early, not early into the war. From the perspective we get, it's like a few months before the war eventually ends, right? But then it's very early into the novel, into like his life as well. We learn that even Roland Weary is younger than Billy. Billy is around 21, 22. Roland Weary is 18, and it's like all the light has gone out of Billy's eyes, and it's so early, not early in his life but also early in his life, and it's just like sad because it's the way you can imagine that a lot of the men like shut down very early on and sleepwalk through the war. And a lot of the book is like Billy not even being cognizant of like where he's moving from, where to where in the war, when they are captured eventually by German soldiers, and it's like they move from here to here, they are moved from here to here, and we are seeing that he's moving, but you don't even know that he knows that he's moving, right? He's just coming to at different points, and it's just like how very early you can tell that his life is kind of finished. And all the time travel where we go to like the past, but also where we go to like the present and the future, which shows us like his life post the war and post the war, just kind of affirms like that look that his life is kind of like ruined forever by what he experiences in the war. And because it's not like a linear story, kind of, I do think like this method does like work well, does gel well with the storytelling. And even when it got to writing, I found very like charming. Like I said, I found the tone of voice, I don't want to say very I always think of things like this very first person and very forward in the first person nature. My mind always goes back to like Salinger's Catcher in the Rye, right? But it's different here in the sense that that tone is kind of there, like very forward first person at times, but also even in the third person where like Billy's story is narrated, it's kind of there. But at the same time, it's like, I don't know, it's more playful, and it's very like there's a lot you can see kind of the technique used to. The more you read, we'll get like allusions to like, we'll get repetitions of certain phrases, we'll get like allusions to something that happened eventually, then we would eventually come to the point where we see like that event play out in real time for us, which I found very interesting. It was done a bit much though, but then I guess like technique is technique, and it is like his technique, so I found his like style very interesting. And he also, I would say I have to highlight like the way he gave like full, even though they were short sometimes, he gave full lives to like even the surrounding characters, the characters surrounding Billy's life who were not major characters, whether it was characters he was surrounded by in the war or the ones in his life after the war. We get a mention of his wife, we get a mention of some guy called Edgar Derby who gets shot a few days before Dresden is bombed or something like that. One of the very odd ones I would say is this figure called Kilgore Trout. We get a lot of mentions on about how he's an author. I would not lie to you, that's mention of him was good and fine until we actually got to the actualization of him in the novel. He's way in the present post Billy in the war, right? And I just found his present very like this, I don't know, not very disconcerting in a way, because I could not fully grasp like what he signified in the book. Like, it was better when he was there as like an abstract concept, as a mention constantly as an author, that one of his like war mates or one of the guys he stayed in psychiatry ward with like read constantly as an author. I read constantly until he became like a real figure, and it kind of not threw me off, but I really did not see the point of him in the novel. Was those kind of stretches that sometimes took me out of like when it got like shticks and things like that, because there's a lot of like his shtick that you get used to here, both in his writing and both like in the manner of his storytelling. But also he would do things like self-insert, like from the first person narrator, who it feels like is telling the story as well. So he would sort of like, we'll get to a point where he would sort of say something like, when Billy Pilgrim's story, but he would say like, I was there, so was my old war buddy Bernard V. O'Hare. And I really liked those self inserts that we got, kind of alluding to the fact that he, the narrator of the book, who was in the war with these characters, because at the beginning it does tell us that, oh, I have changed all the names. And the Billy Pilgrim being a time traveler is kind of the whimsy of it all, but like I said, a lot of it is very like grounded in like humanity. And I would just say that the power really of the story, while I think like there were no high peaks, it's in its simplicity. It's really in its simplicity, because even with all the like dancing around time and space and everything, it's at the end of the day first-hand account, really. Yes, it's third person, but it's also like a first-hand eye account of like this very tragic war that occurred, where there were a lot of lives lost, and like where it also took a lot from even the people who survived it, because they were never the same again. It's really, that's what it really is at the end of the day, like a look at like what war does to you, how it like, you know, or what it did to these men, and how it kind of destroyed their lives forever. I don't think I have like so much to say on this one, because I feel like a lot of like its portraits, a lot of like what it's showing is on the surface. I don't know if you thought that there was any hidden meaning. I'm never opposed to like the conversations we have in the comments, but I really think a lot of it was on the surface, and that does not make it bad by any chance. But there was this kind of punch or something, because it is sad. It is a very sad book, don't get me wrong, it's a very sad book, it is, but like his humor, Vonnegut's humor lifts it up at points, regardless of how like depressing and bleak it is. But then from a story standpoint, there was just something I kept waiting for. And although, even though it did not come, it did not like really like make it suddenly like, wow, that was not good. But then I don't know, it just did not take it to a level where I was hoping I would get to, or like maybe my expectations with this being a classic and all. And so I did not dislike it by any chance. I thought it was quite a good book, but then it's not like an all-time mark classic for me or anything like that. But yeah, I did enjoy this book. I gave it 3.5 stars, and yeah, it's a very short book. It took me a few months to read though, because I was extremely lazy, very lazy. But yeah, I had a great time with this. I'm probably going to try some Vonnegut in the future. It's the way I'm coming to the conclusion of this review, like faster than I expected, but I really do not mind as well. I think I've tried to make all the points I wanted to make in the video. I hope I made some reasonable points, or I hope this is decent. I hope you guys enjoy it. If you liked it, please like, share, comment, subscribe. I am still tackling Frankenstein. I paused on Crime and Punishment, but I will return to that before the year, before we get to the middle of the year. So yes, well, yeah, I hope you like this video. Please like, comment, share, subscribe. I've said that, but I'll probably see you in the next one. Bye.